Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whenever it is for you. For me, it is just past midnight on Tuesday, the 26th of November, which makes this the news for Monday, November the 25th, 2024, day 1006 of Vladimir Putin's war of aggression against the people of Ukraine. How do you do? I'm Peter Alexievich, and this is the Live at 5 from Kyiv, only it's 6. And we can talk about why in a second here, but I see that the peeps are coming in. Good evening, Sharon. Good evening, Eli. Hello, Brandy. How's everybody doing tonight? There's Vanetta. Hey, Betty Thompson. How are you? Hey, Mikey. Hey, Vanetta. Element 106. What is element 106? Americium? No. Wait, let me think. The actinide, seborgium. Thank you, element 106. Nice. Hey, Franklin. Hey, Sharon. Hey, Bjorn. Thanks. Hey, Demood. Hey, Dive Hard. How's everybody doing tonight? So, guys, it has really been a heck of a week for me. I had been given, purely by coincidence, the lives got banned, and I promise I will be on my best behavior tonight to try to avoid that happening again, because I do expect a lot of trolls tonight. Hey, Debbie. Good to be back. Just as the live got banned, I was given a tremendous opportunity to travel to the Donbass with a couple of military guys that were making a supply run of critical supplies and drones and such to the Edelweiss Brigade. And the experience of 3 days in the Donbass I don't know how to put into words the how much I learned and how much more respect I have for these guys. Let me tell you something. That 72 hours was 72 of the most grueling hours of my recent life. It demanded all of my stamina, all of my attention. It was a constant sense of deprivation. There was never enough food. You were always checking your water supplies, making sure you had your own water. Nobody got into the car after we had been out of it without checking under the tires for grenades or improvised explosive devices. We were 10 kilometers, about 6 miles from the zero line, the contact line. Shelling was constant. There were 26 air raid sirens in Kramatorsk in one day. That's more than 1 an hour, right? For the whole 24 hours. It is another world. And as sleep deprived and exhausted and as underfed, if such a thing is possible with someone of my tremendous girth, as I was, one of the things that the guys said is that those 3 days for them had been like a picnic. For them, right, they chose a mission to bring me on. We'd been talking about this for months. And things kept coming up, and they were talking about bringing me along, then they didn't. Then they were talking about it, then they didn't. And finally, this time they did. And the reason that they did is because on this mission, they didn't have to get within artillery range. They didn't have to get within a range of the enemy where the enemy could ambush them and sabotage the mission. They chose a mission where I was in the least possible danger and still be in the Donbass, which is why I love these guys and I trust these guys. And so we'll talk some more about that, and I'll take questions about that trip at the end here. And that trip, again, by coincidence, traveling back to Kyiv, we went right through Dnipro. And that was 2 days after it had been hit by that intermediate range ballistic missile, right? And so I had the opportunity then to jump ship from them and spend a couple days in Dnipro talking to the people of Dnipro and what it was like when that intermediate range ballistic missile came into town. So we'll talk some more about that later. So let's start with the news then. Overnight last night, Russia launched 145 Shahed drones at the territory of Ukraine, of which 71 were shot down, 71 were taken out with electronic warfare, and 1 was returned to sender. Well, not exactly returned to sender. They didn't return it to Russia. It was knocked off course and ended up headed toward Belarus. So that is 143 out of 145. And yet they keep doing this insanity. Russia is rapidly approaching 750,000 men, KIA and WIA, in Ukraine. The number just crossed the 730,000 threshold this week. In all likelihood, Russia is going to end the year, 2 years and 8 months of war, with about between 750,000 and 800,000 casualties. It's insanity. It's insanity. Now, for my money, the top story, the thing that nobody is talking about today, but that everybody ought to be, is Dmitry Medvedev. Medvedev is a Kremlin spokesperson, longtime friend of Putin's, former president of Russia, at least in name. And Medvedev has been the chief, chief proponent of Russian first strike nuclear strikes against the West. He has called for nuclear strikes against New York, D.C., London, Paris, Berlin, Lisbon, Portugal, because you know the Portuguese are the big problem in Europe, right? Medvedev has made all these calls every time anything doesn't go Russia's way. He's rattling that nuclear saber at the bidding of his master, Vladimir Putin. Well, today he did a complete 180, Today he said in an interview with Al Arabia TV that we have no madmen in the leadership of the Kremlin. We will not use nuclear devices. Really? Now, if Dmitry Medvedev says they're not going to do something, and particularly this particular something that he's been screaming for 2.5 years, what could it mean? Well, it could mean that they've decided to do it, right? And the very fact that he's denying that they're going to is all the evidence you need that they are going to. That is not outside the realm of possibility. But I think a more likely scenario is that Russia's strike against Dnipro with that intermediate range ballistic missile, right, one that is capable of carrying multiple nuclear warheads, which was intended to intimidate the West and intended to intimidate the people of Ukraine into submission by saying, look, we can strike you with nukes anytime we want. The launch of this ballistic missile was potentially such a trigger for the United States that Russia called Washington beforehand to warn them. It wasn't a dry run. It was a hot run, Mad Mike. It was a hot run. That missile was loaded with 6 warheads with conventional weapons. Every one of those 6 warheads had 6 submunitions of about 250 kilograms of TNT each, equivalent. Well, That's a big fucking bomb. And it travels, it follows a ballistic trajectory, right? So it goes right up to the edge of outer space before it separates the multiple warheads, which then begin their re-entry. And then each of those submunitions is exposed in its own re-entry vehicle. Boom, boom, boom. And they all hit at once. Impossible to defend against. You could have all the Patriot batteries in the world. You have 36 incoming missiles traveling at Mach 11, 11 times the speed of sound. There's no stopping that. And Russia knows it. Now, let me ask you a question. How do you think Xi Jinping felt waking up and seeing on the front page of the morning paper, Russia uses intercontinental ballistic missile for the first time in history? Because, of course, when this first happened, we didn't know that it was a prototype of an intermediate range ballistic missile. We thought it was one of the standard intercontinental ballistic missiles that Russia has. How do you think Xi Jinping liked waking up to that news? What do you think about Narendra Modi? Narendra Modi right now is depending on Russia for cheap oil so that it can keep growing its hyper-expansive economy. How do you think they reacted, his friends? Now, somebody suggested in the comments, I think China knew. China probably did know in the same way that the U.S. found out. There was a call, because, of course, China's got early warning launch detection systems. If the U.S. early warning launch detection systems thought this was an ICBM because it's built on the RU-26 technology of Russia's ICBM program, then surely China would as well. Therefore, under the international agreements that are in place between the signatories of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, they would have warned China as well of this launch. I don't think they would have liked it. I don't think they would have liked it at all. And I bet you Putin got an earful. That's my guess. I don't know that to be true. And I don't know whether or not he got threatened by other Western nuclear powers for doing this. But for Medvedev to do this 180 immediately on the heels of this flawed attempt to intimidate the Ukrainian people and the West, because I can tell you something. I was in Dnipro for 2 days. Coming back from the Donbass, our path took us through Dnipro. And so I hopped out of the car in Dnipro and I spent 2 days there taking a look at some of the damage. I stood in front of the elderly rehab center, right? It's like a physical therapy center for old folks. That was badly damaged. The missile didn't hit it, but it hit nearby and it did a lot of damage to the... That's the reckless and with heedless disregard for the civilian population, using a weapon like that in a heavily populated city like Dnipro, even if you've got legitimate targets, which by all accounts they did, in fairness to the Russians, the targets were the defense industrial complex in Dnipro. The problem is you got a weapon that's got a circular error radius of 300 meters. What the fuck? That's not precise. 300 meters, that's a third of a kilometer. Right? That's like 0.2 of a mile. Come on, give me a fucking break. You're going to drop that on a city? Well, the world didn't like it. Today, there was an emergency meeting of the NATO Security Council. The EU has called for emergency meetings, right? Because by showing off that you are so desperate that you are ready to go nuclear, the world now suddenly is paying more attention and sees you as the threat you really are. We're not intimidated by you. We're not afraid of you. And we can't let ourselves be. Everybody that I talked to in Dnipro said the same, with one exception. Everybody in Dnipro said the same thing. It was a loud night. It was a loud night. That was about as extreme the response was to this weapon being used in Dnipro. So the Ukrainians are not intimidated. The Ukrainian people are not intimidated. Western leadership may be, but the Ukrainian people are not. I had one of the things, I'll tell you, the guys in the Donbass, we were talking about Trump and whether or not Trump was going to pull support or whatever. And you know what the guys in the Donbass said? If he pulls support, we'll fight with slingshots and bows and arrows. That's what these guys who are living the nightmare of the front line, right? Not the 3-day tourist visa I was on, but the real nightmare of battle on the front line. That's what they said. They could lose, this country could lose all the support of Europe, be abandoned by America, and they would still keep fighting. Nobody is making these people fight. These people fight because they are on the front line, fighting for their homes, fighting for their country, fighting for their families, fighting for their independence. They will not be cowed by these gremlins in the Kremlin and their bullshit. So if you ask me, if you were to ask me, oh, I'm sorry, I totally got thrown off by some bullshit comment down there. I have to keep my head on straight here. Medvedev, if you ask me, why did Medvedev have this 180-degree change in direction? I think it's the direct response of the world to the IRCBM that hit in Dnipro. Now, there is also word there. I don't know if I can necessarily call them reports, but there are unverified stories that the very next day, the Russians tried a launch of the second one of these prototype weapons, and the launch failed. Now, we don't know exactly what that means. Did the rocket blow up on the launcher? Did it go up for a while, then it came down? We don't know what it means. We're not even sure that it happened. But there are some good sources that are reporting that at Astrakhan, where the first one was fired from, and we believe, according to General Budanov, the Russians had at least 2 of these prototypes completed, with about another half dozen in the production pipeline. If the only 2 that they had, if half of them failed on the launch pad, I mean, that's embarrassing, isn't it? That is embarrassing. Oh, yeah, their last 4, if I'm not mistaken, their last 4 nuclear delivery vehicle launches failed, and the nuclear-powered torpedo failed in the Arctic last November. That test was also a failure. It's because there's no, hey, Rose, what do you know? How you doing? Dave is saying the second launch definitely failed. Dave, do you have a source for that? I don't have good sources that I can point to on this story. I only have Telegram channels. But if you have a source, send it to me, would you please? Because I'd like some validation on this. So, okay. These sanctions are hurting Russia. And, you know, Dark Said, hey, Renee Herman, hey, we saw some evidence of that today in Anatoly, Turkey. A Sukhoi Super 100, which is a commercial airliner jet made by Sukhoi, landed in Anatoly, Turkey with an engine on fire. Now, the problem with, even though it's a Sukhoi, right, it's a Russian-made jet, passenger jet, commercial jet. Even though it's a Russian-made jet, the engines are French. And under sanctions, the Russians can't get parts. So regular maintenance, regular management is going to shit because of sanctions on these things. The plane landed with the engine on fire. And I think that this is a harbinger of the inevitable disaster that we're going to see in the Russian commercial airline space. Right now, you got half the... Now, remember, when the war started and sanctions went into place, these planes are not owned by the Russians. They're owned by leasing companies, mostly out of Ireland. The Russians stole these planes. They just stole them. Half of the Boeings that they stole are now grounded permanently and are being cannibalized for parts. Half of the Airbuses that they stole are grounded permanently and are being cannibalized for parts. This can't go on. You're going to see a major critical failure and a disaster in the Russian commercial airline space. It's inevitable. It's inevitable. Now, it's another coincidence, but today the EU announced that it is closing its airspace to Russian air. Now, part of that is in response to these ongoing safety concerns that Russian jets are just frankly more likely to fall out of the fucking sky. But it's not just the safety concerns, according to Ursula von der Leyen, who made the announcement. She announced several new restrictions against Russia in an effort to hold back the Orchistan tide. So not only is EU airspace closing to Russia, but they are directing the use of frozen Russian asset interest to buy weapons for Ukraine, actively arming a country at war for the first time in EU history. They are strengthening sanctions against both the Kremlin and their ally and supporter, Belarus. Hey, Trav, we are back, baby. In addition to closing the airspace, buying Ukraine weapons, strengthening sanctions against Russia and Belarus, they are shutting down the Russian state-owned media corporations, Russia Today and Sputnik and all of their subsidiaries. Russia's bullshit, their machinery of lies, are being dismantled in the EU. And it's all to the good, especially given what we have seen from Russian influence operations interfering in local elections. And it appears that we're seeing that again in Romania. Now, Romania just had the first round of their elections, and the far-right candidate, who was polling at like 0.4%, not even 1%, out of the blue, took 23% of the vote. Took the largest percentage of the vote at all. This is very disconcerting to see this rising tide of fascism inside of Romania. Oh, Russia's interfered in our elections badly, and in Moldova, and in Georgia. And now it appears in Romania. Now, we shouldn't be too nervous about this because there's another election in Romania. So this was like an elimination round. And there's another election in Romania coming up December 8th. Now, unless the Russians are prepared to spend millions buying votes like they did in Moldova recently, the December 8th election should decidedly put this guy out of the running. But we'll see. I have been wrong before. I never imagined we would be living in a world where I'd have to say the words President Trump again. Yet here we are. So the Russians are hardcore, bringing up these anti-West, anti-EU, anti-NATO candidates inside of NATO and EU countries. It's very disturbing, very, very disturbing indeed. So Romania is a domino to watch. This is a domino. Mostly when we talk about dominoes, we're talking about countries and institutions that might fall against Russia. This is one that could fall into the camp of Russia, Romania. Ukraine has introduced a new drone called the Reali, and this drone has a 2,000-kilometer range, which means it can get to Murmansk with no problem. That's where all those Tu-22s and Tu-95 bombers are that bring those heavy weapons to Ukraine, like the MiG-31s actually carry the Kinzhals. I was going to say Kinzhals, but the MiG-31s actually carry the Kinzhals. But the Iskanders and other big missiles are carried by the Tu-22s and 95s. On the subject of airline travel and safety, in Vilnius, Lithuania today, we saw a DHL cargo plane crash land on approach to the runway into a home. One member of the crew was unalived in this crash. No injuries or deaths were reported on the ground. Now, it is disconcerting because it's a DHL flight, and it came from Leipzig. And we know that a couple months ago in Leipzig, there was an incendiary device in a package that almost made it on to a DHL flight before it burst into flames. It has been, and there was another such incident in Birmingham, England, another DHL plane, another incendiary device that went off before it was packed on the plane. Had these incendiary devices gone off on the plane, there's the potential for them to down the plane, and certainly there's the potential for them to force a crash landing like we saw today in Vilnius. Now, in both the Birmingham and Leipzig cases, local intelligence has suggested that these were proxy terror attacks by the Russians. So Russian FSB hired folks in Birmingham and in Leipzig to plant these packages on these DHL planes. Assuming that that is all true, and now today a DHL plane has this problem in Lithuania, is it possible that one of these packages got on the plane and it burst into flames while the plane was in the air? We do not know the answer to that question. And I will not make any guesses, but all things being equal, thinking that Russia is a suspect here seems like a perfectly reasonable thing to do. Perfectly reasonable. Okay, let's take a look at the front line. So Russia is advancing in Kursk. If you look at the Kursk salient, on the western edge, the Russians are making some progress there. But on the eastern side of the salient, Ukraine is making progress. So there's no doubt that the fighting is intense and ongoing, and both sides are struggling as the temperature drops, as the weather becomes less hospitable to any kind of outdoor activity or to the movement of large, heavy armored equipment, right? Rasputitsa, the mud season is coming. I can tell you, out in the Donbass, we had snow and rain, and things were wet, but the real mud isn't here yet. The real driving November rains have not come, not yet. And so things are relatively dry for that part of the world. In Kursk, we saw, okay, now, I was a little bit confused about this. It seems that there's two different things that happened. So we saw first an ATACMS strike on an S-400 radar, and the S-400 radar was taken out. Then we saw the strike last night, an ATACMS strike. So the Ukrainians, just to be clear, the Ukrainians are using ATACMS on Russian territory. You may see trolls saying that they are not, because the hit on Dnipro scared them all so much, right? This, of course, is bullshit. Last night, just last night, the Ukrainians struck the Kalino air base in Kursk. We don't know what the targets were. We don't know what was hit. But what we do think was hit was one S-400 and two of its launchers. So an actual S-400 battery appears to have been a victim there. We don't yet know if if there were any planes or helicopters on the ground. Where the bombs went, where the ATACMS landed, was where you would keep your planes. So it is possible that the Air Force had a bad day last night, but we don't have confirmation yet. So that's the Kursk Air Base, or the Kalino Air Base, where we believe it was an ATACMS strike. We believe an S-400 battery was taken out, and we're waiting on word of aircraft. Now, do I not have that anywhere here? Hold on, because that seems like the next thing to talk about. Okay, I guess I didn't write it down. Sorry. Oh, no, there it is. In Kaluga, the Kaluga oil refinery, the Rosneft Kaluga oil refinery, is on fire. The storage depot where there's 10 standing oil tanks, large oil tanks, that is all burning tonight. And of course, once those oil tanks get going, if there's a lot of fuel in them, it is likely to spread to the others. So we'll see. We'll start the clock. Today is day one of the burning of the Kaluga oil refinery. Right across the highway from the refinery is the Typhoon missile plant. Now, I mispronounced it in an earlier video as Typhon. It's supposed to be Typhoon. Typhoon. Anyway, at Typhoon, they make the command modules for anti-aircraft systems. They make radars. They make missiles. That was also hit with drones. Ukrainian drones hit that. That's about 300 miles inside of Russia, so beyond ATACMS range, right? I take that back, actually. It's 300 kilometers inside Russia. So it's just about within ATACMS, long range ATACMS, but we do not believe it was ATACMS that struck. We believe it was drones. So you got the oil depot burning and the defense manufacturer across the street on fire today. Russia is on fire. There's been no change to the Kyiv salience, but Kyiv city was pummeled today with S-300 missiles. The last casualty report that I saw said that 26 people had been injured in today's attack. That number just keeps going up. Russia is expanding its salience near Kupiansk, looking to cut off the Ukrainians that are between Russia and the Oskil River. Russia is advancing near Tierney, where we saw video footage of Ukrainian civilians being gunned down in the street like dogs. In Seversk, the salient is holding after the scandal in which the general and his staff were all fired, reportedly for filing battlefield reports that were false, reporting false success, and for reckless attacks that put the Russian military guys in harm's way. Now, what is this guy, this Russian General Gennady Anishkin, head of the sovereign Russian army in Seversk, was fired for these crimes. It's sort of a joke, though, right? I mean, everybody in the Russian military files false reports of success, and they all send their men to die pointlessly. So why is this guy getting singled out? It could be because the new Minister of Defense, who is not a military guy, right? He's an economist. He's an efficiency expert. He was just in Seversk in a military uniform, which you never see him in. He's always in a suit because he's got no military background at all. But he went out there. Hey, Joe, what do you know? He went out there to Seversk. He met with this general, and reportedly he said to anybody that would listen, you can make mistakes, but you cannot lie. You can make mistakes, but you cannot lie. Now, that's going to be a problem for most of these guys in the Russian army because that's how they made their whole careers. In this particular case, it could be worse because, get this, this is what happened. The guy lies about what towns they've taken, right? And then some brass from the Kremlin are in town. They go to visit one of the towns that the Russians are supposed to have liberated, and they find themselves staring at the point of a bunch of Ukrainian guns because the town is still in Ukrainian hands. Now, that kind of blatant incompetence might even just get you fired in the Russian army. It certainly seems to have with our boy Gennady here in Seversk. Russia continues pressing at Chasiv Yar, but no movement there. They have crossed the canal, though. They have crossed the canal. And if the Russians have finally managed to cross the canal, it's not a good indicator for the future at Chasiv Yar. I would think. Toretsk remains deadlocked, in large part thanks to the hard work of my good buddies in the International Legion 1st Battalion, especially my boy Camel Toe, who is out there every single day taking care of business. Well done, guys. In Pokrovsk, you've got this tiny little narrow advance. The only thing is, it's about 3 kilometers long. It's part of a broader effort to encircle Pokrovsk from the south. So the Russians did make some progress around Pokrovsk over the weekend. For their part, the Ukrainians in Pokrovsk are working on digging and building 2nd and 3rd defensive lines behind the city. That's in process now. In the Kurakhove direction is very fluid. No pun intended, right? That's where they blew the dam at the Kurakhove reservoir. But the situation is very fluid. Territory is being swapped back and forth. Fighting is intensive and ongoing. South of the reservoir, the Russians are pushing forward into Kurakhove proper. In Kherson, drone attacks on civilians continue. Now the Russians are also using drones to drop landmines into local parks, where at this time of year they immediately get covered by leaves and people are stepping on them. You literally can't go to the park in Kherson. The Houthis, the Yemeni rebels, the Houthis, who have been armed by Iran and supported with monies from the Kremlin and training from the Kremlin, are being shanghaied into the Russian army. The same way that Ugandans, Kenyans, folks from Sri Lanka, Nepal have been shanghaied into the army. They get promised these good-paying jobs inside of Russia. They get promised Russian citizenship. They show up in Russia. Their passports are immediately confiscated. They are handed a rifle and a uniform and told they are now in the army and they are going to Ukraine. Hundreds of Houthis have been suckered into the trip, the one-way trip to Ukraine now, according to reporting in the Financial Times. And these are just the latest bunch of suckers to get shanghaied by the Kremlin, right? We've seen it happen to all kinds of the poorest people in the world. That's who they're doing this to. Oh yeah, Taya, tell me why it's not true. When we have hundreds of hours of prisoners of war from Sri Lanka, Nepal, India, China, Vietnam, Kenya, Uganda, telling us that that's what happened to them. Hundreds of hours of it now. And it's not true? I don't think you know what true means. Cuba too, Walter, thank you. North Korea is different, right? North Korea is different because North Korea is state-sponsored. That's a very different thing. Shanghaiing people into your army is on you. But when the army is the army of another nation state, provided by the nation state itself, then you are at war with another nation state. Ukraine is essentially at war with two nuclear powers simultaneously. They're doing a hell of a job, I'll tell you, given that the enemy had every advantage in this thing. Every advantage, which they have squandered mercilessly and stupidly. For right now, the ruble is holding steady at about 104 to the dollar. We didn't see any real degradation over the weekend. Last I checked, it was just at about 104.01. If anybody wants to check it and see how it ended the day, I'd be interested to know. Russian budget for 2025. 40% of the federal budget will be spent on internal security and on weapons of offense. I'm not going to call it the defense budget because Russia doesn't have a fucking defense budget. Russia has a goddamn offensive budget is what they have. You are so rich in rubles. What a shame you'd have to go to Russia to spend them, Maddie. Le Monde is reporting that the UK and France are discussing boots on the ground in Ukraine. Good. It doesn't matter whether they really are or not. But the idea that Russia might think they are is good for everybody. Don't tell your enemy what you're not going to do. We'll see what happens. Ukraine destroyed a Buk M2 missile defense system somewhere in the east of the country today, along with a Russian BM-27 multi-launch rocket system. Good for you, Ukraine. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister told TASS that South Korea supplying arms to Ukraine would destroy the relationship between Seoul and Moscow. Would destroy the relationship between Seoul and Moscow. The hypocrisy that the Russians, who are now getting 40% of their missiles from the North Koreans, who have 10,000 North Korean troops in the Russian Federation right now, with another 100,000 getting ready to go, apparently, that they would dare say, with their dependency on North Korea, that if South Korea helps the enemy, it'll be the end of ties with South Korea. The hypocrisy is unreal. All that Russia can do is make empty threats. That's all they've got left, are empty fucking threats. There are 45 countries helping Ukraine. Why is number 46 special? Well, I'll tell you why number 46 is special. Number 46 is special because it is ranked the 5th in the world for military strength. That's right. South Korea is ranked 5th in the world for its military might. Why? because the Korean War never ended. They're just in a ceasefire. In the 70 years since the Korean ceasefire went into place, the South Koreans have made it their business to arm themselves and arm themselves well. They are a major supplier of NATO standard 155 millimeter shells to the world. Their weapons work. Their precision weapons are precise. They are a force to be reckoned with. Make no mistake. Only a country as well armed as South Korea would dare let a video like Gangnam Style do so well. They're not afraid of anybody. They're armed to the teeth. So at any rate, this is the latest hypocrisy from the Kremlin. Finally, lastly here in my notes, Great Britain warns of a likely massive cyber attack against energy infrastructure and the power grid in Great Britain. This is according to Pat McFadden, the Minister of Intergovernmental Relations. He called the coming attack massive and reckless on the part of the Russian saboteurs who are likely to carry it out as part of Russia's hybrid warfare, part of Russia's ongoing hybrid warfare against the West, like very likely the DHL plane will turn out to be, etc. Okay. So, guys, that's it for what I have in my notes. That's the highlight of the news for the day. I want to thank Ballerina, who is the sponsor of tonight's live. Thank you, Ballerina. You are the best. Literally could not do this without the help of Ballerina and the other Patreon folks. Deeply appreciate it all. If you are not a Patreon member, I strongly encourage you to be. Any day at all, I could piss off TikTok and be gone. So I'm doing more and more on Patreon and a lot more Patreon exclusive content, including a daily feature called News We Are Waking Up To, which I've been publishing during the TikTok live ban to give you a sense of what that looks like. Now, nothing has been normal for the last week for me, because not only did I have the TikTok live ban, but I was traveling. And so production was not its normal rate. But that'll change now that I'm back home. Although Thursday is Thanksgiving, so I'm thinking of taking Thursday off for the most part. There won't be a live Thursday night. Instead, after Thanksgiving dinner, we're going to go live, and you will have the chance to talk to regular Ukrainian folks who will be here at my dinner. And we can ask them what they think of the world. And you can hear it right from the horse's mouth. Okay. Bobby says, any new confirmation on the Storm Shadow strikes on the Russian command center? So, to the best of my knowledge, Bobby, we don't have any confirmation like you're looking for. To the best of my knowledge, the Ukrainian MOD has not come out and said it was us. That has not happened. Though it does seem to generally be agreed that that is what it was, that it was a Storm Shadow strike. What do I think about your favorite city, Kramatorsk? Tony Takiri. Pal, I got to tell you, I had the best burger that I've had in 2.5 years in Kramatorsk at W Burger. Jeez Louise, that was a good burger. You know what made it a good burger? Not just, the 36 hours prior of, living your life in fear of death, and now you have this great burger. No, it was the bun. The Ukrainians, for all the great bread that they make shitty hamburger buns and shitty rolls. You cannot find a good Kaiser roll to save your life in this country. But the bun, it was glorious. So I had 2 all beef patties on a sesame seed bun, and my life was the better for it. W Burger, if you're ever near the front lines in Kramatorsk, I highly, highly recommend it. Other than that, Tony, I thought that Kramatorsk looked like so many other frontline places badly beat up from this war. Badly, badly beat up. Lawrence Richards, I got to do a video on this. So Lawrence says, is Russia worried about the declining birth rate? Yes. Their own people are calling it a demographic crisis. Right now, the population of Russia, if I'm not mistaken, is falling by a rate of 1 person every 41 seconds. 1 person every 41 seconds. That means 3 people every 2 minutes. 3 people every 2 minutes. Well, 3 people every 2 minutes is what? 3 people every 2 minutes is 90 people an hour. 90 people an hour times 24. Do the math, right? The population, the birth rate is less than the death rate. And this war is not helping. Not at all. Migrants don't want to come to the country. So you got a shortage of 4.3 million workers right now in Russia. The demographic crisis in Russia is real and complex. And I should do a video on it. I'll try to do that tomorrow, Lawrence. Is that true, Sharon? They banned abortions in Russia. That could be. Dark Irish. These people, I don't know if they'd like potato rolls. Potato rolls are a little sweet. And nothing here is sweet. Except me. Ah. Dave, that's not why they're abducting Ukrainian children. Please. You really think they're abducting Ukrainian children so that they can be adopted into good Russian households? Bullshit. Bullshit. They're stealing Ukrainian children so that they can sell them to the worst people in the world. That's why. Grow up. Disgusting. Beyond words. You're right. The fact that they don't have enough people is one of the reasons they're bringing in North Koreans and Houthis, etc. How much of that is war casualties? Very little, actually, FNL. Right. Russia's a big country. So with 140 million a day, or I'm sorry, 140, I think 145 in the 2020 census. You know, only, what, 250,000 of those are war casualties over 3 years. So it's not really that much. It's a much more systemic and deeper crisis than the war. Exacerbated by the war, certainly. But the real problem is that you don't have a successful society that ignores the 3 laws that all societies have embraced. Every successful society has made it illegal, right, has made it a crime to lie about your neighbors, to steal from them, or to unalive them. And all of Russian society is built on lies, theft, and unaliving. You can't have a successful society that way. You just can't, it just does not work. Oh, Feisty, you're making me hungry. Yeah, things are not good. Things are bad. Things are not good in Ukraine. Okay, you're not wrong. I don't think that the UK and France are going to send troops. I don't think so. Not in the way that you might be thinking of, that is to the front line. It is possible that under the right circumstances, you could see the French and the UK sending troops, say, to guard the Belarusian border and free up the tens of thousands of Ukrainians that are stuck there, where nothing's likely to happen. But you got to have them there. Because you got sabotage groups coming across the border. You got, that kind of thing. But nothing significant. You could see the French and UK filling in on that kind of patrol. Yes. Wait, I was going to say something. Oh, Joe, shut the fuck up, you. Joe's always teasing me with Taylor ham and eggs on an everything bagel. Bagels, man. This country needs a good bagel shop. Okay, the problems in Ukraine. That's what I wanted to talk about. As bad as it is for the Russians, and it is very, very bad for the Russians, it's not easy for the Ukrainians. Now, right now, I don't know if Dusty is here. Dusty's usually around. Or any of the other Ukrainians that are regularly here, Valley or our buddy Anthony in Odessa, or any of the Ukrainians. Look at. You guys know I do lots of things here, and I don't talk about them much because it's not about me. I try to keep the focus on Ukraine. But one of the things that I've been doing recently is I've been working with schools to get art projects to the front line. Messages from the kids of solidarity, of support, of gratitude, that kind of thing. It does wonders. The guys at the front need to be reminded of what they're fighting for. It is tough out there. And they get that crayon drawing of the house that says thanks. It's deeply meaningful to them. They get a box of cookies, right, that somebody baked for them. It means a lot when nobody is doing anything for you and everybody's trying to kill you all day long. So what I'm trying to figure out is how to get together with the right people and really scale this up. Flood the front line with art from the kids, with cookies, with bread, with whatever. And I'm looking for anybody in Ukrainian education who might be able to mobilize the schools. Any creators in Ukraine who might be able to speak to their audiences. Every Ukrainian that's on here to talk to your schools. You have kids in school, talk to the art teacher. Talk to the kids. The kids have fathers, brothers, uncles, sisters in the military. What unit are they with? Make something nice for them and their guys. And send it off before Christmas. If we could do that, it would mean so much to them right now at literally the darkest time of the year. So that goes out to all the Ukrainians. Anybody that's in Ukraine that could help with that, send me a DM or something. Oh, good. Dusty, there you are, pal. Yeah, please, hit me up, pal. Maddie, that's the thing. If you're outside of Ukraine, I don't see how you can. It's not practical for you. It's just not practical for you. They're right. This is a low-level grassroots farm to table kind of thing. And for my international audience, I don't know of any way that you could. I can't think of any way. You know. Okay. What time is it here? It is 2:02. So we have been on for an hour, but there's still 176 people in here. And we were off for a week. So I am happy to talk a little bit longer if anybody has any questions. I know there were a lot of things in the queue. Thank you, Eli. I missed you too. I know there were a lot of things in the queue that I passed over. I'm sorry. The queue moves fast sometimes. I am just fine. Thank you, Penjorp. So questions, comments, points of observation, or personal need. Mad Mike, I'll tell you, I was on a red eye, and I don't sleep well in the sleeper cars. They're not quite big enough for me. I always feel like I'm going to roll out. So I don't sleep too great in them. I got home at about 6:30 this morning. I ate the other half of the pizza that I bought in Dnipro and took on the train with me. And I had a cup of coffee thinking I was going to get some work done. And no, I went right to bed and slept until 4 in the afternoon. I didn't even get up to pee. Thank you, Feisty. It's nice to be home. Tough love coach. It is hard to hear the truth. It is. It is. But it is so much more satisfying than a comforting lie, in my opinion. Yeah, Walter, I did get kicked off my channel. I got banned for a week, but the ban is over. Ukraine is doing everything it can to change the tides. I think we can help the guys at the front and with their morale, if here in country we can get them some messages of hope and love and support, and a few chocolate chip cookies would not hurt thrown into the deal. Ukraine, as far as I can tell militarily, Ukraine is doing everything it can to change the tide. The real tide is going to change when the Russian economy collapses, which is coming. What can Americans do? So this is my new thing, guys. The best compliment I think I ever got, or one of the best compliments I ever got, was from the command. They call him the commander, but really what he is like a master sergeant. And anybody who knows anything about master sergeants in the U.S. knows that those are the guys most deserving of our respect. They are the guys in the trenches getting shit done on an operational and tactical level every fucking day. They make it all work, right? So this commandant of the Edelweiss drone group said to me, that he thought he was impressed. He was impressed, in his words, that a nobody would come to Ukraine when so many Ukrainians are fleeing it at this time. And in that moment, I felt very seen, because I am nobody. I'm nobody special. I have no military background, no medical background. I don't have the skills these people need to fight this war. I don't have any money. I'm not a millionaire who can support it. There's nothing special about me. I'm just a guy who saw that this is important and deserved my support. And so I do everything I can, every little thing I can, and in every little way I can to try to help. And that is all that any of us can do. And you don't have to be a somebody to do it. We can all do something. And if you're an American and you're in America, and you want to do something to help Ukraine or to help America, because America's fucked right now, because of the Russians. It's the Russians that did this to us. It's the Russians that did this to us, make no mistake. In this time of ignorance, do something for yourself. Go learn something. Learn something new. For no other reason than because, time of ignorance. How do you fight ignorance? You learn. Learn something new. In this time of lies, where the people in charge are liars and lie about everything for no reason other than their own unenlightened short-term self-interest. In a time of lies, pursue the truth. And in a time of hate, embrace acts of love. That's what we can all do. Now, there may be extraordinary circumstances, like in my case, where you can pick up and go to Ukraine and try to be helpful in person. But most people can't do that. So within the context of your life, learn something, pursue the truth, and embrace acts of love. Right now, that's what all of us can do and should be doing as best we can. I don't know, does that help? Okay, tough love agrees. Good. Do you think Joe Rogan will talk to Klitschko? So Vitaly Klitschko is the mayor of Kyiv and a former world boxing guy. I don't know if he was champ or whatever, but he was a big boxer, right? And Rogan got on the other day and just spouted a bunch of really weak-minded, snowflake kind of bullshit, Russian propaganda. And Klitschko called him on it and said, invite me on your podcast and we'll talk about it. And I don't know that Rogan will take him up on it. I don't know that Klitschko speaks good enough English to go on the Rogan podcast. I mean, he doesn't even speak Ukrainian. He's a Russian speaker, but he's the mayor of the town. Right, Corky? Not everybody can do this. But you can do what you can do. Tony, are you coming to town? Tony, are you in town on Thursday? It's American Thanksgiving. I'm having people over. And yes, I need mustard. The hot kind, not the sweet kind. I didn't like the sweet one. Bobby never liked Rogan. I used to like Rogan. His interview with Terrence McKenna is one of my all-time favorite interviews. It's 3 hours long, and it goes like that. Yeah. Does he speak good English? Truthful? I don't know. I've never met him, never seen him, never talked to him. I don't know what will happen next because I am not a tarot card reader. Yes, Bobby, I am a loudmouth know-it-all. Oh, you meant Rogan. Oh, sorry. Maybe Sunday. Good, groovy. I look forward to seeing you, Tony. Okay. Again, guys, I want to thank Ballerina, who was the sponsor of this live. I want to thank everybody that sponsored Thanksgiving dinner and is making Thanksgiving possible. I want to thank the members of the moderator team of Cheyenne, Vanetta, PT, Jay, and Travis. Thank you, Vanetta. Smorgasbord, no ICBM was fired at Ukraine. I know that that was the headline. I know that that's what everybody thought at first. But the weapon that was actually used was a prototype of an intermediate range ballistic missile. Now, so it's not true to say that this was the first. It was not an ICBM. Not that you could tell the difference on radar, which is why the Russians called DC to say, we're launching this thing. Yeah, I don't know. Stern is dumb sometimes. He's gotten better as he's aged, but still, he's a fucking child. Not that he isn't entertaining. He is, but not for serious subjects. So big thanks to the moderator team. Thanks to Nightshade, who has the Peter's Peeps group on the Book of Faces. Thanks to Lars, who has the Discord server. And a special thank you to Vanetta, who has our Google Doc share, where you can get letters to the White House, Congress, and the UN. Corky knows something about American football, I guess. I don't know anything about American football or about European football, for that matter. Thank you, Chef Deb. Very nice to be back. Hang on. Let me look at one thing real quick here. Guys, I should really... Well... Okay. The Patreon is going pretty good. My monthly income is up to $1,300 a month, 90 paid subscribers. I'm almost back up to the $1,400 a month high that I reached at one point with 100 paid subscribers. So if anybody can join the Patreon and kick me a couple bucks a month to help pay the rent, keep me fed, etc., please consider joining the Patreon. I could really use your support. Or if you're looking to sponsor a live like Ballerina did, and he'll be our sponsor tomorrow night as well, send to the PayPal at least $50, and you will be a sponsor of a live. Good night, Colin. Anybody that can help in any way, you know, the heat is on, which means that the heating bills are going to be coming. And, yeah. So any help is appreciated. All right. That's it for me. It's 2 o'clock in the morning here. It's past 2 now. I'm Peter Alexievich. This is the Live at 5 from Kyiv, or at least moving forward. I hope it will be back to 5 tomorrow night. Good night, David Keller. Good night, Mike. Thanks, everybody. I sure appreciate it. Take care.